how they are implemented in the EU countries. Today we are going to think during the workshop part of the meeting how to face obstacles that block us in opening the market in such a way to meet the requirements. We will talk about the concerns of the organizer of the organizers of the market or any process participants. I believe this is going to be yet another opportunity, not only to listen to, but also to talk, to exchange opinions, information on the topic. Again, welcome everyone. Welcome all those who decided to visit us today. We have quite difficult weather conditions. Thank God it's not raining, we are not freezing, but it's pretty hot. So we are going to have a working meeting to give you a chance to share your comments, to share your opinions, that we are always interested in the process of opening the passenger rail services. That's all about the introduction. Let's move on directly to our agenda. In the beginning, I would like to invite Madam Edyta Jaszczuk, Director of the Department of Transport Organization in the Center for EU Transport Projects, who is also coordinating processes of liberalization of the market. That CEUTP, our center, is responsible for. So we will talk about where we are and what is the direction outlined. Thank you very much, Edyta. The floor is yours. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome everyone, also our guests who joined us online, those who joined us from the EU countries. Our guests will share their experience with us later on. I believe this will be a very important part for you, for us. These presentations and their experience will be valuable. In the beginning, let me explain where we are. And I'm quite sure you know our plans already. You know what we are doing and why. But as we know, new people join us all the time. We would like to share some introductory slides to outline the direction for the discussion, to tell you what we are doing here. First of all, why the process is so important, why we are doing this now, and why the Horizon 2030 is a key moment. Why the tender, why procurement is planned for 4 years? We know that we get signals from the market that this horizon should be longer. We know it, that the longer contracts, the easier, the better it is to plan your operations. However, on this diagram, you'll see some breakthrough moments. I do hope that we will be able to stick to the timeline. So liberalization should happen in 2030. Then the first section of the high-speed railways section will be opened. Then we will launch the consecutive ones. So the system, if it is changed in Poland, will have different burdens. So the next generation of procurement should already encompass the new requirements and these high-speed railways related aspects. But we want to keep and maintain the positive trend. That's the most important for us. Here I would like to show you Poland vis-à-vis Europe. In Poland, we have more and more passengers. They choose railways. And here we have a big challenge. We have to face a big challenge to provide proper quality of our services. This is difficult due to the capacity of the railway, but the trend is positive. Let me stress it again. And the operations and meetings with you are useful to plan the future procurement in the best possible way, specifically when we plan timetable or the offer for the first generation of procurements. So let me show you increase of passengers vis-à-vis the EU average. You can see big increases thanks to the EU funds, that's clear. And EU funds, EU has been involved in distribution of funds for transportation sector. Let me explain that my presentation is displayed in Polish because we have more participants coming from Poland in the meeting, but after this meeting our foreign guests will get the presentation in English as well. Okay, so what comes next? Liberalization of the market. We know that the commercial market is already open. There is a growing interest of this market. I'm not going to evaluate the success of it, but we see there are carriers who are interested in the commercial market as well. We'll see how this will be reflected in new tenders. But we have to bear it in mind while planning our offer, while talking to our partners. We know the regulation on capacity has been published. They provide some guidelines, new guidelines and new approach to the allocation of capacity and coming up with priorities. So in fact, everything happens in the same time. So it's so important, all the more it is important to prepare everything well. That's why we talk to all our partners to make it without unnecessary disturbances. Now a few words about our new role. As you probably know, we do support the Minister of Infrastructure in preparations aiming at opening the market and in delivering milestones in this area. This task, we have been commissioned with this task some time ago. A lot of work has been already implemented. In a moment I will show you timetable and schedule, and I will explain what has been done already and what is still ahead of us. This is an important role, and we are glad that we were, as an institution, indicated as a trusted partner. I believe that our recent activities from the recent months and last year proved that this was a very good decision. And now a few words about main tasks that were implemented in recent months. Development of the new transportation plan. This plan was published for consultations. Right now we are working on the final versions of the, including comments raised, and now we are in the moment to improve the document. We did support ministry in these works, also with Polska and Institute of Railways. So developing the offer and packages, that's very important, and the key task, key element of OPZ that we are going to publish. The offer was important for the transportation plan, but details and the vision into packages, it is already something that will be just the heart, the backbone of the procurement of the tender, depending on how many packages we come up with. It's not a secret that we are planning and discussing with the ministry the division into packages, but as we still have ongoing works on certain assumptions, and we do not get any clear position from the ministry, we are not able to present these details yet. But I believe that main decisions will be taken soon, and soon we will be able to talk to the market on the proposals. The compensation liberalization model. So for the packaging, for staging, for all issues included, and settlements of compensation. So all the financial issues are being discussed. In our company, we developed a tool to calculate compensation, and I do hope that this tool will be further developed and it will be used for a better allocation of public funds. Because we will end up with a tool that will probably calculate and take assumptions that are needed actually for proper calculations. Right now we are working on the tender documentation. We now developed certain business requirements and legal basis for this procurement documentation, what is mandatory, what has to be included there. So, of course, it is done based on the Regulation 1370 and also the Act on the Public Transportation and Public Procurement Act, because this tender will be organized according to public procurement law. This is a big challenge because the legislation is not always consistent. Therefore, our lawyers are really heavily involved in planning everything properly and successfully. So we are going to open the bid soon. I will show you in a moment on the schedule. Meanwhile, let me show the institution and the way we change. So far, we have been associated as a center for distribution of the EU funds, and we have 20 years experience, great success when it comes to certification, and of course, the inspections that are carried out on individual financial perspectives are very, very successful in the area of transportation. So we got new tasks. We want to grow our institution, and on top of just one part related to distribution of the EU funds, we want to also support the ministry and organization and support of development of transportation system. Of course, we've been developing consultations or consulting services for quite a long time. We meet during various organizations and meetings. We develop various areas where we can talk to you, where we can present our products that we deliver to our beneficiaries or to the public administration or any other entities from the market. So this knowledge exchange forum and the meeting today is a proof, as well as our open railway network, proof that we are successful in our work. So of course you can participate in the meetings of experts. We utilize your knowledge, so it proved to be a very successful platform. Feel invited. And we can say that we use this year not only to help to deliver certain products, but also to get ready and build, develop a center of competences, so that we are ready to manage the whole procurement process properly. We employ new people, so whenever you find some publications of vacancies, please join us, because we can have a realistic impact on the big change that is planned in that railway sector. Of course, internally, we also undertake certain activities for our experts to get ready for new tasks. I believe this is a great mixture of the professional experience and developing competences that cannot be built in a short period of time. We are developing specific procedures. I'm not sure if you know, but we implemented the project management system. The whole area is divided into 15 projects. So it's worth stressing that in a systemic way, we have planned everything properly according to certain procedures. So we are not working in silos or departments, but we have like cross-section projects where we have experts from the whole Poland, from individual areas. So our institution and ministry is supervising the whole process.
And now the schedule, you probably know it, but we are following it, so you can check any possible changes to the schedule, especially those related to major milestones. We haven't had any so far. We have very challenging and tight schedule, and we know that the market expects to have a longer mobilization period, but we have launched the process with huge momentum, and we have 2 years for mobilization, provided that the contract will be signed by the end of 2028. If the contract is signed earlier, mobilization period will be longer. That's why we want to have all the loose ends tied for the tendering procedure to make sure it's a smooth sailing exercise, and then mobilization period for selected carriers, because I suspect we'll have more than one package. The number of packages will be announcing it later, but we want carriers to have more time for the entire procedure and to take over services. So right now, consultations concerning the transportation plan came to an end. We are currently working on finishing it, and we hope that before the end of September this year, this plan will be announced. So we will be making pre-notification required in line with Regulation 1370. And as you know, this notification has to be made a year before, while waiting for the tender to be announced. So we are making the most of this year to roll out other activities. So communication made publicly that we have consultations in place. Unfortunately, we have to wait. These are requirements of the law. We need to wait for a year, and we can complete packages, our offer, main assumptions. Main assumptions for tender documentation until the end of this year. We want to have draft contract finalized, the basis version, and next year, after public consultations, and when we know how many packages we will have, tender documentation for each and every package will be finalized. Initial announcements may be modified in 6 months, which is why next year, early next year, we will have sufficient information from the market to announce that these are our packages, and we'll be adapting tender documentation to all of them. Okay, so right now a couple of words about major event and major process we have launched. I've received feedback, your feedback, and I'm very happy I did. And let me briefly comment on consultations. First of all, we've decided to have consultations as far as preliminary market consultations. Consultations, as you know, are there so we can collect as much information from the market as possible. We need to consult certain solutions, and we want to talk to experienced entities because we want those consultations to be as effective as possible. What doesn't mean that we are not talking to other entities, what is best testified by this meeting. And we've had a rule that we did not have one-on-one meetings. We didn't want to favor one entity or ask one operator about something and another operator about something else, which is why we want to have in preliminary public consultations, and we did get a response from great operators. The period when you can submit your applications has been extended until tomorrow and by the end of the day. But even if you supply your application later, you will be eligible for consultations. But nevertheless, we'll be taking specific steps. Namely, we have divided consultations into 3 stages. Stage 1 is a survey, is a questionnaire survey that will be sent to all applicants. In the survey, which is quite detailed, we are finalizing it. I think it's going to be beneficial, is going to provide us with lots of information. Stage 2 includes workshops, and we are going to invite everyone who has submitted an application and has been positively verified. We'll be discussing assumptions, and it will be an opportunity for the participants to talk to themselves. And stage 3 are one-on-one meetings during which entities will be able to present their plans, share data which are more sensitive. So these are 3 main stages that will be summed up in a report submitted to the ministry. Because we are supporting the ministry all the time. We're not an organizer yet. We are still waiting for the solutions to be adopted. But nevertheless, we think that the plan and activity spread in time will help us to implement different formats of activities on different stages to provide and share more information with operators. And we are not wasting this time, which could be allocated to mobilization. According to regulations in place, we need to wait a year before notification is made. I look forward to openness, to sharing experience, especially on part of entities that will be taking part in the process, because we want to have tender documentation to be robust. For example, we will be not asking for information that will be unfamiliar to everyone, and we believe that such format of discussion is very useful and is very relevant. It's also provided by the law and it's implemented by other entities. We believe it's going to generate value added for the process. And briefly, let me comment and present some visuals we have created to illustrate our objective and the role of the center. We believe that our contribution to the process and development of this center for competencies, we are bringing experts together around the center, and that will translate into a different approach to planning, to network planning. It's going to optimize the process. We hope that we will be able to integrate the market to a major extent. It's a challenging period of time because we have major changes for the network in Poland and in Europe following the regulation on the capacity. And I hope that we will be able to implement a process to create a robust network and to give us momentum, because passengers do not have to be aware of the process. Changes should be invisible to them. It should be just an improvement in the quality, better access to tickets, easier purchase of tickets, greater availability noticed by all passengers. They should not see that major changes are underway. And that was my last and final slide. I would like to thank you for attention. Like I've said, I would like to encourage you to visit our website, Otwarta Kolej, Open Rail. And of course, I encourage you to engage in discussions, to provide hopefully constructive criticism. And I look forward to seeing you during different upcoming events. Thank you. So thank you very much. Edyta Jaszczuk, Director of the Department of Transport Organization, Center for EU Transport Projects. Coming up next is a session dedicated to two paths to liberalization, international perspective. I did not say right at the beginning of the conference that should you need to listen to interpretations, we have headsets for you. And yes, at the far end of the room, Elżbieta Borotyńska, my colleague, is going to provide you with headsets. Okay, so session one, two paths to liberalization, international perspective. In this module, I hope our international guests are with us. We have scheduled three presentations, three case studies, Sweden, Finland, and Spain. And opening this session is Sweden. We are going to discuss combining open competition with competitive tendering, lessons learned after 15 years. And our guest, I hope you can hear us, is Dr. Gunnar Andersson, Senior Advisor for Regulation and International Affairs, SJAB. So hello and welcome, and over to you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Gunnar, just a second. We will share presentation.
Excellent. Thank you. I hope we can all see the first slide now.
Yes, we can see it now.
So, as I mentioned, I will try to give a bit of an overview of experience. A few milestones has been a stepwise process, so going on for quite some time. So we usually say that the first step was in 1988 when we had a Transport Policy Act, which meant that we got vertical separation of track infrastructure from operations, and also decentralization of the responsibility and resources for local and regional passenger rail services to the regional PTAs. So I should mention that the way public transport is organized in Sweden, is that we have about 20 regional PTAs responsible for bus services and also train services, local and regional train services. And then on top of that, we have sort of a national, also national services. And for all these, all the infrastructure, we have a common infrastructure manager called Trafikverket. So this first initial reform meant that it became possible for the first time to have competitive tendering for the regional railway passenger services. And this was a bit of a surprise that the regional PTAs also used this option. It was not really foreseen, but they did already in 1989, and that also led to another surprise that we got the first new entrant already in 1990. And this sort of reshaped the market already back then. It also affected subsequent policy. So we got competitive tendering of long distance passenger services, which were procured by the state in 1993. We got market opening for rail freight services in 96. In the late 1990s, we got a breakthrough for new entrants on several contracts. Later on, one can say that Sweden moved to the open access market stepwise, in a stepwise manner, with first, no, please go back. Yes, so with market opening for night trains and charter train services, then weekend train services, and then finally in 2010, we got full market opening for international and domestic passenger train services, and that took full effect in December 2011. So that's roughly 15 years ago. We also got a law which tried to define the boundaries between competitive tendered services and the commercial open access services in 2012. And in 2015, we got the first open access entrant with coming in with brand new rolling stock, which we hadn't seen up until then. So next slide, please. So this is showing a long period of time, but as you can see, we had a very good development in terms of passenger demand for passenger services. Of course, with also affected by COVID. Freight has also increased, not so much, but it has at least increased over this period as well. Next slide, please. And if we look a little bit closer at the passenger services by category since the year 2000, and here I also introduced a dotted line to where we got the period from where we got full open access in 2011. So you can see that there's been a quite substantial increase in both open access services, the demand for open access services, but the big story is the tremendous increase in passenger kilometers by regional PSO trains. So the competitive tendered regional trains, and also a decline in the services provided by the national PSOs, which are mainly night trains to the very far north of Sweden. So you can see now that the passenger kilometers by regional PSOs, they are now at the all-time high, even at a higher level than before the pandemic. Next slide, please. To show a little bit more of this story is these maps show the expansion of regional passenger train networks over time. You can see that these were quite in the early days. These were concentrated around the cities, the main cities, but these services have then expanded over time to include a large part of the national railway network. And if we switch to the next slide, please, you can see that on top of all these regional services, there are, of course, also the long-distance national services, both those provided by the incumbent SJ and also those provided by the new entrants. And these maps show both the open access services and also the national PSOs for long-distance night train services. Next slide, please. I want to show you that an issue in Sweden has been actually that the very strong competition from regional PSOs and the expansion of regional PSO services have affected commercial open access services. So this is an example from a line between Stockholm and Uppsala. Uppsala is a city north of Stockholm, and for a very long time, SJ has provided open access or commercial services between these cities for commuters, also being part of more long-distance services. Since 2006, we started to get competition on this line also from regional PSO services. You can see how these have then developed over time. And eventually, we got to the point that it was no longer sustainable for SJ to provide these commercial open access services because competition from PSO were so strong, both in terms of competition for capacity, but also competition for passengers, since the tickets for these services were heavily subsidized, of course. So in 2024, there was a decision to totally dismantle these commercial services, and that also meant that the PDAs, they had to expand their services even more to sort of to keep up the supply on this line. And there have been other examples of this. So this is something that may be a bit peculiar to the Swedish market, that we've had this very strong competition between commercial services and publicly tendered services. So next slide, please. This is just an overview of the entrance in the tendered part of the market going all the way back to 1990. We had quite a few new entrants, some local operators, but also, of course, international companies coming in, also some acquisitions. Today, one could say we have about, I would say about 7 operators in the market as a whole. Next slide, please. And this is a similar slide showing the open access services, the companies entering there, also exits, of course, and also there are some acquisitions. So, for example, now the Finnish railway operator VR has become a very, very strong actor in the Swedish market, both on open access services, but also and also on regionally tendered services. Yes, next slide, please. So I wanted to go a little bit more deeper into the open access competition, and perhaps the most important case we have is between the 2 major cities of Stockholm and Gothenburg. So this is they are about 500 kilometers apart, these cities. And of course, there we have had the incumbent SJ for a long time, providing about 18 daily departures in both directions with frequent stops, also many connections between with other services of SJ and also with bus services and other public transport. Run with refurbished trains from Bombardier, several types of classes and so on. And then in 2015, MTRX entered the market as a new actor. They provided about half of the number of departures, not so many stops, no connecting services, but they brought in entirely new trains from Stadler. And they have had a little bit different philosophy when it comes to classes and flexibility. And similar travel time, a little bit longer, but similar. And this competition, open access competitions, clearly meant that there was price competition on this line, with the average price of MTRX tickets being around 25% lower than SJ's. So SJ's prices also fell, but passengers, the number of passengers increased. So in total, there was a sort of an expansion of the market. But it was difficult for MTRX to get profitable. They didn't get profitable until 2023, and then 2 years ago, the company was sold to VR. We also had another new entrant in 2021, more Flixtrain, more of a low-cost services, much fewer departures, but interestingly, with connections to their own bus services, older vehicles, so a bit of a more simple services, but they also provided space for bikes on board, which is not available for others on other parts of this market. But they decided to suspend their services in 2024, stating that they wanted to focus more on the German market, and they haven't come back since then. So next slide, please. I want to tell you a little bit about the capacity allocation process, because the expansion of railway services over time has, of course, meant that there are capacity constraints. And we should remember, we do not only have long-distance passenger services, we have many regional passenger services, and also, of course, freight services. And basically, they all run on the same tracks. We only have about, roughly about, I think, 68% of the network is single track. So there are some challenges in terms of capacity allocation. Basically, all the undertakings and other applicants, they apply for capacity according to what they prefer, what they want in terms of routes and timetable. Then the infrastructure manager makes a first effort to put everything of this into a national train plan. Then when they do that, they discover that, of course, there can be conflicts, and they try to solve that during a coordination period, where some RUs may be then asked to sort of adjust their requests, perhaps a little bit of a delay, or a longer journey time, or other adjustments in the timetable in order to make room for more traffic, so that sort of everything can be fitted. If there are remaining disputes, and that happens, of course, they try to resolve them by means of priority criteria, which are based on a model where they try to calculate the most socio-economically efficient use of the infrastructure according to a certain model. And this sometimes means that some applicants are rejected, and that can be in some cases it means that long distance services are prioritized, but there could also be other cases where other types of services are prioritized. And then eventually a national train plan is adopted, and this is, of course, an annual process. We'll see some of this may change with the new capacity regulation, which is coming into effect, but this has been the basic way to solve the capacity allocation process in Sweden for quite some time. Next slide, please. So this is my final slide, and I will try to summarize a bit what I said and also mention some other lessons. So what we can see is that market opening, and this is both market opening for open access services and not least also for competitive tendering and the decentralization process, they sort of unleash the potential for growth in several types of railway services. So this has been a positive development. The negative side, so to speak, can be that the continued growth has resulted in capacity constraints, and this makes the allocation process quite complicated, and also the whole system is quite vulnerable to disruptions. We can see, as I mentioned, that the regional PSO services, they have expanded quite tremendously, and to some extent, this expansion has happened at the expense of commercial open access services. So a lesson here is that there is a need for clear boundaries and limitations. And I would say that the current law we have on this in Sweden has not been sufficient in sort of protecting commercial open access services from the expansion of PSO services. There have been some difficulties to reach profitability for new open access related undertakings. It takes some time, so there is a need for them to really be committed long term in order to be successful here. I also would like to mention that we've had a development. As you remember, we now had competitive tender for a very long time in Sweden, and we can see that in recent years or over time, these contracts have become more complex, and also that they have tended to sort of push risk towards the railway undertakings. When it comes to vehicles, when it comes to other incentives regarding passengers and so on. And this has probably been a factor in the case that several PSO contracts have recently been terminated early and being replaced by emergency contracts in a period where we're waiting for sort of a new tender. So, and also we've seen that also fewer companies have been interested in taking part in these competitive tenderings for these reasons. So this is a problem which the industry has to deal with, so to speak. So that's my final slide, and next slide up. I want to thank you, and of course you can reach me by email if you have additional questions. Thank you.
Dziękujemy bardzo serdecznie za tę porcję wiedzy.
Thank you very much for this knowledge shared by Swedish representative. The question is whether our guests in the room would like to ask a question regarding the Swedish presentation. We have some minutes left, so this is a good moment to ask such questions. Do we have any volunteers with questions? Yes, we do. Just one question. At the end of your presentation, you said that certain PSO contracts have been concluded prematurely. Could you explain why this happened?
Yes. What has happened is that some operators in some contracts have found that they cannot continue to run the services without making huge losses, and therefore they had asked for an early termination of the contracts. So what has happened is then that they have, in some cases, also then had to pay a termination fee, sort of to get out of the contract early. There have been also, I believe, other cases where the PTA has found that it's been necessary to shift or to close the contract because they have not been sort of satisfied with the service provided. There have been problems, for example, also with lack of rolling stock, sufficient number of drivers, things like that have affected some contracts. But yes, this has been a problem in recent years and maybe something to consider for the future. But I would say that part of it has been this sort of development to put more and more risk to the operator, to the railway undertaking, and in the end, that can be, of course, very, very costly and problematic. Thank you.
Dziękuję bardzo. Mamy jeszcze jedno pytanie.
Thank you very much. We have yet another question. I wanted to build on the previous question. Did it relate to the length of contracts that you concluded with operators? So if the contract was for a longer period of time, then it was more difficult for an operator to provide the services? Was it the case?
Perhaps there could be such an element. These contracts have typically, in recent years at least, been running or concluded for 8 to 10 years, sometimes with also possibilities to extension. And of course, if you discover a few years into the contract that you do not have the means to provide the right services, or you're losing money, then know that the contract will run for another maybe 5 years. It will be well, of course, they will try to find solutions, and I know in some cases there could be solutions to sort of renegotiate the terms, but that's of course difficult when you have had a tender, and normally you would instead go into a new tender. So I would say yes, to some extent, long-term contracts are perhaps more sensitive to this. I think there is a need to build in some flexibility into longer-term contracts already from the beginning. So that's clear also for all the bidders taking part in tender, if you want to sort of avoid this type of development. Thank you.
Dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you very much. Another question?
Tak, tutaj jeszcze będzie.
What is the ownership structure of the entities that currently operate on the railway Swedish market? Can you see a certain trend where the private equity is purchased out by international railway providers who belong to the state-owned companies? Or maybe the private equity is maintained on a similar level, has been maintained on a similar level over time?
I would say, by and large, it's probably been a similar share of state ownership versus private ownership over time. Most of the private operators are quite small, and then we have sort of the larger entities which are state-owned. I think the big change that happened when MTR was acquired by VR, or MTR Express was acquired by VR, is that of course MTR was owned by the state of Hong Kong, or ultimately the People's Republic of China, and then there was a shift to a European railway undertaking owned by the Finnish state. So this is sort of two different types of state ownership, but one would be outside of the EU and another one would be inside the EU. That's perhaps the main change that has happened in this regard. Thank you.
Dziękuję bardzo i pozwolę sobie już troszeczkę
Thank you very much. I have to close the discussion, or maybe we have time for yet another question, the last one.
Ja mam pytanie odnośnie
My question is about this connection between Göteborg and Stockholm. I understand that now on this open market we have two incumbent state-owned carriers, PSOs. After 2024, anyone else wanted to join this line? Or maybe you have any other examples when this operator is actually operating in Sweden, beyond the example of Göteborg and Stockholm?
So the line Stockholm-Gothenburg is probably the most profitable line in Sweden. Therefore, it was sort of natural that we would see strong open access competition there when the market was fully opened. I would say that also before MTR entered, there was a more of a minor company running services that more like touristic services between those two cities. There haven't, since Flixtrain left, there haven't been any new entrant coming in on that line, but we have had for quite some time also open access competition between Stockholm and Malmö. Malmö is the third largest city located in the very south of Sweden. So there we have another competitor, Snälltåget, which run sort of more of a low-cost service, competing with SJ, but quite substantial service on that line. And then there are some other examples of open access services which are sort of more of complementing the services of SJ rather than direct competition, so to speak. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. That was the last question. Do we still have time for yet another question? Yes, we do.
Okay, so following prematurely terminated tenders, did organizers manage to split risks to mitigate the risk that the contract will be terminated prematurely? Have they identified risks that should be borne by the railway enterprise or the organizer? Have they split the risks?
Yes, thank you. Good question. I think from the railway undertaking side and the organizations representing them, there is strong belief that you have to split, in particular, the risk regarding rolling stock. So, and in particular, when you go from one operator to another, and in these contracts, the rolling stock is typically owned by the procuring authority, and there is if in the contract there is an element of also that the railway undertaking has to take care of maintenance and things like that of these vehicles during the contract period, they need to know that the rolling stock is fine and okay when they take over the contract. And I believe that's been a risk which has been difficult to handle, and that some PTAs may not have been prepared to handle. So from the railway undertaking side, it's clear that you need to take care of that risk related to rolling stock. But so far, not all PTAs have maybe recognized that this is one way to handle that. Another is, of course, related to incentives for the number of passengers. So in some contracts, you've had incentives in order that you will get more money if more passengers are traveling. That can be very sensitive to shocks, for example, like the pandemic, and other things that the railway undertakings cannot really control. I believe also in some cases there have been huge penalties some things when there have been problems, which have also caused problems. But I would say what we are currently in the process of finding out how to better split the risk between PTAs and railway undertakings, and it's an ongoing process which hasn't really been concluded yet. Thank you.
Dobrze, serdecznie dziękujemy.
Okay, so thank you very much. Thank you very much for your questions and very open answers. Joining us today is Gunnar Andersson, an advisor for regulations at SJ. Thank you very much for your presentations. You deserve applause. Okay, so we were listening attentively to our guest and drawing on his experience. And now Finland, opening the passenger rail market in Finland from policy design to implementation. And this part will be presented by Emi Nikkanen, Senior Advisor, Department of Networks and Services, Ministry of Transport and Communication. Hello, we can see each other. I hope that we can also hear each other.
Yeah, hello everybody and good morning. I hope you can hear me well, and my apologies as well that I couldn't be able to come in person to see you today. Perfect. So I can see that you already have my slide there showing. So let's go straight to business, as they say here in Finland. So please, you can change the next slide. So I'm here to tell you about what we are currently doing in Finland to open up our market for competition in the passenger railway side. And just to give you a short overview about what the Finnish railway network and market looks like at this moment, so that you will understand later on why we are doing certain things and what's the reasoning behind that. So as you probably all know, we are located up in the north of Europe. Finland geographically we are basically an island. We only have 3 neighboring countries, Norway, Sweden and Russia, of course. We do not have any open cross-border connections in railways. We used to have a few quite significant cross-border connections to Russia, but due to the current geopolitical situation, our eastern border has been closed for few years now. So that traffic has basically stopped. We have only one cross-border connection via railways up in the north to Sweden. That hasn't been in operations for quite some time, for a few decades. But I'm happy to announce that we are starting in 10th of August this year. We are opening a brand new passenger railway connection to Sweden up in the north. So the rail connection would go between Tornio and Haaparanta, which are neighboring cities up in the north of Finland and Sweden. The one specific thing about our market and our network is that our rail gauge differs from the general European rail gauge. Ours is a bit wider, which means that you need a specific set of rolling stock to be able to operate in the Finnish market. The one characteristic in our market is also that even though geographically we are a quite big country, so we have very long distances, but we have quite a small population. So the population in Finland is a little over 5 million people, which means that our market compared to other markets in Europe is relatively small. At the moment, in passenger traffic, there is only one operator in Finland, and that has been the case since the last 160 years. So we haven't had any other passenger operators in Finland than our state-owned company VR, that was referenced also in the previous presentation as well. The situation is a bit more optimistic or better on the freight side. So VR, of course, is the incumbent and has the biggest market share on that side as well. But there are some smaller operators on the freight side. Next slide, please. Currently, in Finland, when we are talking about PSO contracts, there are only two competent authorities. So we have the Helsinki Region Transport. They are responsible for organizing the commuter trains and buses, trams, and metro here in the Helsinki region. And then the other competent authority is our National Transport and Communications Agency. So they are called Traficom. So they work under our ministry, and their job is to procure all the PSO contracts or the passenger rail traffic in other parts of Finland. So we don't have any other regional authorities in railway passenger traffic beside the Helsinki region transport. And you can see on the right side of the slide, I have provided you a general picture on where our rail connections go. All the pink lines are currently the traffic that VR is operating on a market based, so there are no subsidies or PSO contracts on those lines. And then all the other colors represent the traffic that currently the Finnish state is procuring. The national contract that we have was established 2022. And it is set to be in force until the end of 2030. So it's around 9-year long contract. It was directly awarded to VR, and currently, let's say until the beginning of this year, VR has been the only organization that has owned any rolling stock used in passenger traffic. They also own most of all our stock in freight traffic as well. But of course, like I said, there are other operators in the freight side who own their own rolling stock, and we also have some companies who use a lot of freight traffic on railways to transport their goods and services, who own their own rolling stock as well. But when we look at the PSO contract that we currently have with VR, that it's currently a net contract, meaning that basically all the risk is with VR, and the estimated value for the whole contract period is around 1 billion euros. Of course, that doesn't mean that we would subsidize that amount VR, but it looks at the whole fiscal turnover of the contract. The contract is mainly financed by the Finnish state, but we have some contracts with some regional cities and municipalities that are financing some extra traffic as well. And like I said, the HRT, they have their own contract that was publicly tendered a few years ago, but the winner of that tendering procedure was VR as well. And their contract is roughly the same length as ours currently. Let's go to the next slide, please. And when we are talking about what we are doing currently, so our market has been legislatively open for competition for a few years now, and which means that previously we did have in our legislation it said that, for example, that VR was the only operator allowed to operate passenger traffic in the Finnish railways, but those kinds of laws have been overturned. So anybody is welcome to come to operate in the Finnish market if they, of course, apply with all the EU regulations and safety regulations and so on. But there are no legislative hindrances for the open access traffic in Finland. We are also very committed to promote fair and open competition, and we will continue to do so by opening up the markets decisively and responsibly as well. But as you may have figured out already, if you take into consideration our relatively small market, the different rail gauge and the risks that go along with those two. We know that in Finland, for us to really open up competition in reality means that the availability of rolling stock and depots must be arranged in an impartial manner. So currently VR also owns all the depots in Finland. But since the beginning of this year, we have established a new public rolling stock company. So it's 100% state-owned. It is not part of VR, and part of VR's rolling stock that we are currently using in our PSO traffic has been transferred away from them to this new company. And the idea is that in the future, when we are tendering out our packages, if you are an operator and interested in taking a part of our tendering procedure, you don't need to worry about the rolling stock. The rolling stock will be provided for you by the Finnish state. So we have taken away the risk related to rolling stock issues in that way. Also, we are currently working on to establishing a separate real estate company in which all the depots and some other real estate related to our railways would be transferred away from VR to that new company. That company would also be owned by the Finnish state. And like I already said, we are also going to begin, or we have already started our tendering procedure for our new PSO contracts that are expected to start in the beginning of 2031. And our timeline is that Traficom has just released the pre-notification in May, and the public tendering procedure is scheduled, or our aim is to start it next year from now, so next summer, next autumn, around that time. And we are hoping that the new contracts would be signed at the end of 28 or the beginning of 29, and we would have a 2-year mobilization period as well. we are only going to subsidize or tender out certain routes. So not all the Finnish market will be tendered out, only the certain routes that we know that the market-based operations would not be able to survive. Next slide, please. So, like I said, what has already changed in our market? We have just established our rolling stock company. There is still a significant amount of rolling stock that we still own, but that rolling stock will be only used in those market-based routes that I just mentioned to you. Also, our rolling stock company, their authority only or competence is only related to the passenger railway side. So all the freight rolling stock will stay with VR as well. The other, like I mentioned earlier, that currently we only have 2 competent authorities in Finland. We did do in the beginning of this year a legislative change that now some regional authorities have the ability to have the authority to procure passenger rail traffic as well if they are if they want to do that. And also with that change, we also made some amendments to our national law in which we specified the rules of procedure related to these public procurement tenderings on rail passenger services. Currently, even though it's legislatively open for regional authorities to apply for this kind of authority, we haven't had yet anyone coming forward saying that they wish to be have that independent authority. But we will see what will happen in the future with that regard. Next slide, please. And like I said earlier, so currently where our process is going is that Traficom is currently planning the tendering process. The pre-notification was published in May, and they are having ongoing market dialogue discussions currently. And like I said, the tendering procedure is expected to start in next year. And of course, like I said, the real estate company and the project relating to establishing that organization is also going on. And we are also doing quite a lot of rolling stock investments. So the rolling stock that we have in Finland, it's some of it's quite old, and we need to invest in that rolling stock so that we are able to operate passenger traffic at the same level and safely when we are going to the 2030s. And then the last slide, please. So here is just an outline of what our roles or what our market would look like in 2030s when we are looking at those PSO contracts. So of course, even though our ministry is not the competent authority or doing the actual tendering, we of course will still prepare all the necessary political and strategic policies here in Finland, all the legislation, and also it is good to note that all the money needed from the state budget also goes through us in the future as well. Like I said, the competent authority is Traficom. They are doing the tendering and they will be the contracting parties, and their job is to rent the necessary rolling stock from our rolling stock company, who is responsible for the life cycle management and new investments as well in the rolling stock. And they are responsible for the cooperation with the real estate company when it comes to depots and organizing the maintenance services or the locations of the maintenance services. And then, of course, we have the operator, whoever that may be in the 2030s, and their job is to, of course, operate the trains, be the main way for the passengers or the main contact point for passengers as well. And of course, they will have some maintenance related responsibilities as well. But we can go to the last slide. But that is actually everything that we are having going on in Finland right now. And I'm very happy to answer any questions that you may have. And also you can find my information at the end of my presentation as well. And you can always send me an email if you wish. Thank you very much.
Dziękujemy bardzo za tę interesującą prezentację.
Thank you very much for this interesting presentation. I think this is a time for a Q&A session. Any of you would like to have a question? Good morning, Marcin Klinowski. I have a question related to the almost last slide, whether the pool of the rolling stock purchased all the rolling stock needed for operations from the incumbent operator, or the company who will manage real estate will also get all real estate needed for technical backup for the selected operators in order to provide PSO services.
Yeah, so to answer that, so all the rolling stock needed in our PSO contract in 2030s has been or will be transferred. We have the situation that we are in the big, like next year, 2027 and 2028, we are having or receiving some brand new rolling stock that is currently, we are testing it. Some of the rolling stock is going to be brand new that VR doesn't even own yet. But yes, all the necessary rolling stock will be transferred, and the same goes to the real estate side as well. We of course VR also owns real estate that they need in their like mundane operations that doesn't necessarily have connection to the rail traffic straight. So of course those kinds of, like I'm talking about office spaces and things like that, of course won't be transferred away from them.
Dobrze, dziękuję. Drugie pytanie.
Thank you very much. The second question, please. Please present yourself so that we know what institution we represent. Krzysztof Konik.
Subsidies will be allocated to market-based routes. What about the compensation for the discounts that you have in your legislation for children, students, conscripts, and so on? Are you going to apply the obligation of them only to pay PSC contracts, or for the open market there is some legislation demanding also honoring the benefits of the passengers? That's the first question.
Yeah, I have some problems hearing. Could you repeat the question, please?
To może po polsku. Czy przewidują państwo zachowanie honorowania ulg?
So, will you maintain the statutory reliefs for students, big families, or the military people, also in this commercial part of services in the open market? Price reliefs for tickets. If so, would you have a system of compensation, or the operator will have to bear the risks of the difference in price?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and I have to say that we haven't yet decided that. Like I said, we are having ongoing market dialogue with different operators, but I would assume that there would be some kind of compensation thing figured out in the future. We have some like pensioners, military personnel, and of course students. They get a certain discount in the Finnish market, and of course our aim is that those passengers will benefit from those services in the future as well. But like I said, we are still that is still something that we are discussing the specificities in that relation.
Next question, if I can monopolize the market of questions. So do you believe that this public procurement will be divided into parts beyond the Helsinki region to increase competition, or you would rather foresee one big package as a whole?
Yeah, we haven't done any official decisions yet, but we are discussing possibly dividing it into two packages. Our packages, like I said earlier, even the whole package is, when you compare it to other packages in Europe, it is relatively small. So dividing it into more than, let's say, two parts might not be beneficial for anybody. But yeah, we are considering about dividing the package, which would mean that in Finland in the coming years we would have three packages that are tendered out. So the two packages from the state and the one from the Helsinki region transport.
I już ostatnie pytanie. Czy przewidują Państwo też objęcie tutaj kontraktu?
But do you believe that the contract for the public services will be covered or will be covering international services and connections with Sweden as well?
Yes, it will.
So based on the arrangement with the Swedish operator, or maybe based on some commercial services, or maybe hybrid? Do you have an idea how to organize it, or is it prematurely to talk about it?
It's probably because the thing with our cross-border connection in Sweden is that it's actually it's only under 1 kilometer. So we are talking about very short like geographical route that we are talking about. Currently, the services that are going to start in August, they are procured by us. And there we have done a cooperation with the Swedish authorities, so to say that the services going from Finland to Sweden, they will be covered by the Finnish PSO contract, and of course then we are discussing with our Swedish colleagues at the moment how to in the future make sure that the traffic then on the Swedish side, or the timetables on the Swedish side and on the Finnish side would go together the best possible way, meaning that how we can make sure that the people who are traveling from Finland to Sweden by train it would be easier or the most beneficial for them to change trains in Sweden and then go on and travel further, whether it's north of Sweden or south of Sweden, perhaps even Stockholm. So that is the synchronization of the different timetables is something that we are currently working on. We weren't able to do that perfectly for this fall because there is also the rail capacity has already been awarded in the Swedish side and the Finnish side. But when the new time or the new capacity allocation period starts, then we are able to do that more perfectly as well, and to make sure that it's the easiest way to travel for the passengers, no matter whether you're going from Finland to Sweden or the other way around.
Dziękuję bardzo. Czy jeszcze jakieś pytanie z sali?
Thank you very much. Any other questions from the room? Jakub Fondecki, Foundation Prokuran. I have a question about real estate company. Who is the owner of real estate company, and how did you finance purchase of real estate necessary to maintain rolling stock?
So the real estate company, it hasn't been established yet, but it will be owned by the Finnish state. And because the company hasn't been yet established, the financing questions are still undergoing, and unfortunately I can't publicly yet say anything about it. But when it comes to the rolling stock side, I can that that was financed basically through public markets.
Dobrze, dziękujemy bardzo.
Thank you so much. All questions asked? I think we exhausted the questions. Thank you very much again for this interesting presentation and of the situation in Finland. This presentation was delivered by Emmi Nikkanen, Senior Advisor from the Department of Networks and Services. Thank you very much. Give her a round of applause. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, and now we travel from Scandinavia to the south of Europe, namely Spain. We can see our guest, Spain, liberalization of railway. Ewa Palenzuela, General Directorate for ADEF. Good morning, madam.
Dzień dobry. Good morning, everyone. So, first of all, thank you very much to the organizers for inviting Spain to take part in this event. We have a strong relationship with Poland, built on several cooperation agreements, and it's a real pleasure to be part of this discussion. I would have really liked, as my colleagues, to be there with you in person, but unfortunately I couldn't. Let me thank you as well, my colleague from ADIF, Álvaro Andrés, here online, for organizing and making internally possible these events. And last but not least, thank you to my colleagues from Finland and Sweden for their excellent presentations. There is clearly a lot we can learn from each other. So yeah, I don't know if, I can see my presentation. So we will see along this presentation that, I will explain in about 15 minutes how ADIF has tackled this process of liberalization. And we will see that the point of arrival is the 3 framework agreements for rail passenger services subscribed within Spain and with 3 railway undertakings, one of which is the incumbent. So next 2 slides, please. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, but before I get to this, let me give you a brief introduction to the Spanish context up to 2019 in order to understand how capacity is allocated in a framework agreement scenario. So next slide, please. Yeah, on one hand, as in many other countries, Spain had a 30-year monopoly in the railway sector. Besides, Spain has a complex network with 3 different gauge and more than 500 works on the railway network causing temporary capacity restriction, or TCRs. Also, we have bottlenecks due mainly to congestion in passenger terminals due to limited number of tracks and platforms. But on the one hand, Madrid has 2 main stations, one with an average rate of congestion of 150% and the other with 79%, and Barcelona station with more than 100%. On the other side, RUs were showing a high interest in high-speed lines. So 3 main corridors were preferred by RUs. So there are the red color one in the map, so Madrid-Barcelona, Madrid East with Valencia and Alicante, and Madrid South with Sevilla and Málaga. And also the RUs were at the same time asking for Entity to invest in rolling stock. So next slide. So how the liberalization process, the liberalization of passenger rail services was envisaged under these conditions, or in other words, what are the principles that gave rise to this liberalization model, which has been valued by the European Commission in a public and positive way? Next slide. So ADIF chose an active position in order to create stability in long-term available capacity, faced to a passive auction where IM just guarantees open access, but not long-term solutions, which for us was a problem, as we've just seen, because we had many congested lines and because new RUs wouldn't have certainty to make investments. Also, regarding the plurality of capacity and lines, the framework agreement of this first framework capacity offer have only been subscribed for these 3 high-speed corridors that I saw you before in the map, and only for rail passenger transport. So the structured capacity was offered into 3 packages for at least 3 competing RUs. These packages were adapted to the quality of previous services, the frequency of the service, and the train efficiency. Our framework agreements have a long term of 10 years because we thought that these allow RUs to make investments and to consolidate and improve their brand. The priority was given that every candidate was allowed to request freely, but framework agreements was awarded to the RUs committing to use more paths. So offer may have been null and void if RUs couldn't have requested less than 65% of the offer capacity. But as we will see later, this was not the case. We also took deeply account the customer vision. So RUs were heard through interviews held based on a single questionnaire and a non-disclosure agreement. All the passenger companies in Spain were invited, and in addition to others who had expressed interest through the media in operating rail passenger services. Next slide. So yeah, that improved also the financing for, another of the principles was that the realization improved financing for IMs, and that's because of the increased use of the network. We arrived also to reduce the turnaround times in terminals. We provide a high service frequency for all RUs and also an intensive use of their rolling stock. And transparency and non-discrimination principles were applied, of course, all along this process. So same rules and deadlines has been established for all candidates with no privilege, even for the incumbent, and all has been published in the network statement. So yeah, next slide. Yeah, the key to success has been based on this capacity optimization process. So moving from a kind of messy wardrobe to an integrated clock face timetables. And so making possible for the society to be able to choose more products and regular services. On the one hand, by giving continuity, as I explained before, to the existing services, and on the other hand, by generating enough additional capacity to answer to the needs of the RUs, of the new RUs. The first stage in this process consists of declaring the available capacity. This available capacity was structured by ADIF in three theoretical packages, coherent according to the surveys and along the lines we have indicated before. So each package obliged to go to the three axes included, so Barcelona, East and South, to avoid that we call cherry picking, and that is to avoid allocating capacity to business model excessively concentrated in the Madrid-Barcelona corridor, making impossible other destinations. So because the aim of our process was to bring competition to all the high-speed corridors in Spain to the most benefit of the end users, to the society. So ADIF offered three sets of chain train paths that were publicly available to all RUs. So one large package, we call it package A, with 63%, one medium package, package B, with 26%, and one small package, package C, with 11%. So RUs ask for the package that best fit their business strategy. But however, for greater flexibility, applicants were allowed to request additional paths from other packages in order to improve their commercial needs. ADIF assigned the set to the RU proposing a more intensive use of the set. And yeah, the package were made up with different time frames for each corridor, because as regulation states, framework agreements don't specify a particular train path. Next slide, please. Although we have, as we have explained, ADIF offers a fully open access to its network since December 2020, according to the four-way package, ADIF considered interesting to promote specific measures and opt for the strategy in which RU request a capacity package. So yeah, next slide. So the milestones of this process. Framework capacity was offered in July 2019. 6 RUs asked for capacity, and demand was clearly higher than offer, so 40% exactly. Next slide. Yeah, framework agreements were finally subscribed in May 2020. That was not an ideal moment with the pandemic situation, but so the package A, so services of a similar scope and schedule to those of the incumbent operator, was awarded to Renfe, which started its service in December 2020. The package B, which contains services for direct competition with the incumbent operator, was awarded to ILSA, or IRIO, which is the brand name for high-speed services in Spain, and they didn't start running until November 2022. And the last package, package C, so containing a limited number of daily service for a low-cost business model, was awarded to Real Sfera, or WeGo, which started services in May 2021. Next slide. Yeah, this slide with this chart showing the framework capacity offer per direction and day is just to show you how the capacity use indicated in the current timeline has increased up to 70% depending on the axis, thanks to the framework agreement. So this additional capacity, which is considered one of the keys to the success of this process, has allowed, on one hand, the access of new operators, and on the other hand, the continuity of existing services. Next slide. Yeah, and this slide is just an example of how RUs had to request capacity for the axis, for instance, Madrid East. As we know, framework agreement don't specify paths in detail, but a time period, in general, 1 hour, as you can see in the chart. Next slide. So now let's move on how to explain how much capacity reserved for framework agreement and how a DIF prioritize the allocation of capacity through framework agreements. Next slide. Yeah, in the axis where framework agreement were subscribed, there is about a threshold of 70% capacity allocated in form of framework agreement. Remaining capacity is reserved for other traffic, so PSO, extraordinary traffics from other candidates, and even from RUs wanted to subscribe another framework agreements. And this remaining capacity, they will ask them for capacity through the ordinary timetabling process. So the framework agreement, the framework capacity doesn't and shall not exhaust the available capacity. This is very important. And here as a DIF, we have been free to decide this percentage and also free with fairness criteria and subject, of course, to the approval of our regulatory body to decide not to offer other framework agreement in other axes for freight trains, for instance. Next slide. So all RUs having or not subscribed a framework agreement ask for capacity at the same time. So at the ordinary process with the deadline set in the Spanish law and network statement. So at present, after the modification of Spanish regulation last December, we have two different deadlines in Spain. So one for international allocation at X-8 and another for national allocation at X-8.5. So as the Spanish framework agreements are just subscribed for national traffics, the deadline for us capacity is X-8.5. So once the deadline has precluded, a DIF study all the requests asked on this time simultaneously. So this is not the first come, first serve principle, as we can see in other figures, like in the rolling planning in the new capacity regulation. So, and we allocated capacity as indicated in the next slide, please. So the criteria that we applied are the following disorder. So first of all, framework agreements. Regulation, national regulation was amended to give the highest priority to framework agreements traffic over other types of traffic. In second place, there is the specialized infrastructure that is paths for more than 318 kilometers and with speed trains at 300 kilometers or more. Three is for the PSO, the public service obligation. In fourth place is the international services, so cross-border services are prioritized to ensure international connectivity. In fifth place, schedule, so the frequency of regularity of the services, so how many days a train runs is considered. And in the last place, the system efficiency. This is a mismatch criterion. So the overall efficiency of the system is taken into account, for example, optimizing the capacity usage. Yeah, and as we can see in the slide, freight transport services must also be considered carefully, especially those with an international dimension. Yeah, next slide. And now some reflections on lessons learned from this first offer of framework capacity through framework agreement Spain. Next slide. Yeah, the success of this model lies in its flexibility. So a process must be adjusted, in our opinion, based on the unique aspects of this network. So the context, the growth potential, the capacity, the congestion. In general, capacity allocation methods are not a right of the applicants, but one of the IMs, and IMs has to be able to choose the best and most efficient method to allocate capacity. In this case, we consider through framework agreement, and in the Spanish case, just in 3 axes, and just for passenger services. Regarding the standardization, it is clear that rules must be the same, but each phase of the process must correctly select the ones that produce the desired effect. We also stand for IM's core function, so only IMs have the systematic view and the operating and technical capability to ensure the most efficient use of the capacity in a transparent and non-discriminatory manner, but this one don't prevent supervision from the regulatory body as we have. It is true that all this process entail administrative burdensome. Since the 3 framework agreements were subscribed in May 2020, there have been several amendments. For instance, applicants and also IMs for works are allowed for an annual reduction of their PATS commitments of up to 10%. So one of these amendments has been as a consequence of the change in the economic situation and the reduction in the demand for mobility caused by the COVID. And each amendment provokes a huge workload, consensus among RUs, involvement of the regulatory body. Well, we also have to take into account the uncertainty in the new infrastructures, the availability time, the performance level, the congestion. So we have to be very careful in bringing out the second framework capacity offer, because the commitments with the companies are long-term. And also take into account the segment limitation, allowing enough capacity for other applicants, new entrants, cross-border services which are not part of framework agreements. Next slide. Yeah. To end, and after this first phase of liberalization, we are currently working on a second phase to subscribe new framework agreement in other axes. Next slide. Yeah, I will give you a brief outline of this second framework capacity offer, but if you are interested in knowing more details, you can consult them in our network statement, in ADIF network statement, in its Annex N, where ADIF has published the preliminary information on this new capacity offer. The purpose of this early publication is to provide enough information in advance to enable RUs to prepare their mobility studies and business plans earlier. ADIF will publish more information containing the rules that will govern this new framework allocation process, but sorry, for the time being, this information remain confidential. But I can share with you that the corridors included in this second capacity offer are those colored in the map in yellow. So Madrid, Galicia, and Madrid, Asturias, Santander in the north, and Madrid, Huelva, Cádiz in the south. So it confirms the administrator intention to carry out an orderly introduction of competition on new rail corridors beyond the individual request of operators. Next slide. Next slide. The following lines, the difference in between the two processes is the following lines with commercial interest generally involve a change of gauge. New companies have to build new trains with this feature. The new lines don't have as much commercial demand as the old ones, and the combination of existing new destinations allows the RUs to have through traffic via Madrid. Next slide, sorry. I was there. So and the volume of capacity offer in the new process is significantly lower. So 334 PATs daily in the first framework capacity offer versus just 72 PATs daily in the second one. and the railway charges revenues will be much lower as a result. And in short, the difference between the two capacity offers implies that the need that we design a different tendering or award procedure. And next and final slide. Dziękuję.
My również dziękujemy bardzo serdecznie za przedstawienie.
Okay, so thank you very much for presenting the infrastructure manager's side and terms and conditions of allocating capacity. So it's question time. Do we have any questions? Please introduce yourself. Bartłomiej Morga. Hello from the entire team of CPK of Poland Airport. I'm representing the team. I wanted to ask about the second stage of liberalization, because we've heard and we read that the ministry has frozen the process some time ago to rethink access rates. You have said that you have diagnosed lower demand for western and eastern part of Spain. So my question is, you have also mentioned that some information is confidential. Is it because you are reviewing rates all the time? And is it really so that carriers, operators who in stage one, Vigo, for example, was arguing that rates are too high, are you really engaged with them in active dialogue?
Thank you for the question. The thing is that the process is not frozen, but it's taking more time than scheduled. We have some difficult times as well in Spain, but the process is keep on going, and we know that RUs are longing for the process. The process is almost defined. And we are just waiting for the last instructions, but for the time being, this remains confidential. And I'm not sure to get the last part of your question, but we're still keeping an intensive and active dialogue with all the RUs, even the ones who were not in the first capacity offer. So yes, I don't know if it's...
Okay, so let me be more specific. The date you have mentioned, practical implementation of phase 2 around 2030, is this date still relevant? And have you thought, because the process is taking longer, have you contemplated the inclusion of the bus corridor, which is currently under construction?
For the time being, the bus corridor is, as you say, under construction. There are many TCRs in that, and as I explained, the IM, there are long-term compromise, so it could be very risky for both sides to allow capacity or to open capacity in this axis where we have so many works. For the time being, the axis that we will be open for this second capacity offer, we will be the one that I saw you. So in the north, Madrid, Asturias, Santander, and in the south, Madrid, Cádiz, Huelva.
Okay, so thank you very much. Have we got any other questions to our guest? Max Klinowski, perhaps a little bit off topic or perhaps not. What's the perspective of implementation of high-speed lines connecting Madrid and Lisbon? And you asked the infrastructure manager, do you see the potential in commercial carriages between Portugal and Spain using new dedicated infrastructure?
Okay, I must confess that it is a little bit out of my scope, and well, we are currently working with the minister. I know that both Portugal and Spanish minister are working on that. Freight services will be definitely the one who will be in this agreement. I know also for the Portuguese side that they are working on their high-speed lines in order to also build framework agreements, and we have having discussions with them in order to reach agreements. Yeah.
Dziękujemy bardzo. Czy jeszcze jakieś?
Thank you very much. Any other questions from the room?
Nie. Dobrze, bardzo serdecznie dziękujemy za
All right.
tę część,
Thank you very much for this part,
którą przedstawiła pani Ewa
presented by Eva Valenzuela, from the Direction for Exploitation and Operations in ADIF. Give her a round of applause. Thank you very much for your presentation, ma'am.
Dziękujemy bardzo.
Thank you.
Szanowni Państwo,
Ladies and
dobrze,
gentlemen, now,
teraz myślę, że zasłużyliśmy na
I think we
przerwę.
all deserve a break.
Jesteśmy o czasie.
We work according to our schedule, the coffee break planned until 12:40. Today we will invite you to a real coffee, which will be served next room. Enjoy. Thank you very much.